सिंतास मुआहदे की अगर हम बात करें तो पाकिस्तान की तरफ से जो हिंदुस्तान पाकिस्तान के वाटर चैनल्स के ऊपर डैम बना रहा है किशन गंगा और रतले की तरह के, उनको कंडेम भी किया गया और ये भी कहा गया कि ये एक्ट ऑफ वॉर तस्वुर किया जा रहा है। और साथ साथ आलमी कम्युनिटी के नोटिस में भी ये बात है कि जो दरियाए सिंध का पानी है वो बहुत बड़ा सोर्स है पाकिस्तान के नहरी निज़ाम और पाकिस्तान के ज़रूरी निज़ाम की जो ज़रूरियात हैं उनको पूरा करने के लिए। तो इस सूरत हाल में वर्ल्ड बैंक की जो प्लेटफॉर्म से ये मुआहदा हुआ था, इसकी खुलम खुला खिलाफ वर्जी जो हिंदुस्तान ने की, इसके क्या नताइज हो सकते हैं? आलमी कम्युनिटी इस पर किस तरह से भारत को प्रेशराइज़ कर सकती है कि वो इस ट्रीटी को, इस मुआहदे को ऑनर करे? इस पर हम गुफ्तगू करते हैं। Joining us from New York is Scott Kelly. He's the head of Water's Edge. Thank you for joining, Scott. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Let's talk about the Indus Water Treaty. This is something which has survived wars in the history between India and Pakistan. For instance, the war in the 60s and then the Kargil war as well, and then the war in the 71. But what actually happened this time around which made India to put the agreement in the abeyance? Because if the argument is about proxy warfare, which is the pretext of the Indian government as well, then how could the agreement survive 3 wars but not the recent skirmish that happened over the Pahalgam incident?
Excellent point that this treaty has survived multiple conflicts between India and Pakistan, and the recent conflict seems rather small in comparison to previous ones. What's likely driving India to withdraw from the treaty unilaterally has more to do with their own domestic concerns over water supply and their long-standing dissatisfaction with the current division of water between India and Pakistan as governed by the treaty. Yeah. And they're using this as an opportunity to renegotiate the treaty and secure more water for themselves as they also deal with the effects of climate change.
Yeah, but since the treaty clearly mentions that it can't be suspended by the consent of one party and both the parties have to agree for suspension or renegotiation, Pakistan is not a party to renegotiation so far. So how is India going to navigate through it if we talk about the principles of the international law? Isn't this an abrogation?
Well, yes, this is a violation of the treaty itself to unilaterally remove itself from the treaty. As you said, there's no provision for it. But what there also isn't a provision for in the treaty is any enforcement mechanism to compel India to comply with it. So although it's been a triumph of diplomacy that this treaty has lasted for so long, ultimately it's all carrot and no stick. And so India has assessed that it's not likely to face any actual consequences other than rhetoric in the international community for withdrawing from the treaty.
So what kind of repercussions could they face? Because if, as you're saying, that there is no clause in the treaty which mentions that one party could suspend it, so is it possible that the international community somehow stresses the importance of the treaty and the water scarcity as well? Because if you deprived the water share that Pakistan is assigned through this treaty, the entire country could sink into a national security issue. So there could be repercussions for India when it comes to the Pakistan's government and its response as well. But what about the international community? How do they respond to something like this?
Well, this is one of the key limitations of international law, is that there really isn't a strong enforcement mechanism in the international community to compel states to comply with international law. And even if there wasn't the Indus Water Treaty, the principle of equitable distribution of waters and rights amongst non-navigable waterways between states is a long established part of international law. So even absent the treaty, India would have to allow Pakistan fair and equitable use of those waterways since they run through both territories. But the only mechanism that really is in place to enforce it is a binding resolution from the UN Security Council. Now, right now, India has very close ties with Russia. They're getting a lot of cheap oil from there due to the U.S. sanctions regime as a result of the Ukraine war. And Russia is likely going to use veto authority, even if Pakistan manages to get a resolution in front of the Security Council to prevent any binding resolution from happening. This is something that Pakistan cannot rely on the international community to assist them with until a catastrophe has already happened. It's a very dangerous game.
Well, this is kind of a glitch in the matrix then. If there is no enforcement mechanism, for instance, if we talk about ICJ as well, it does not come with a binding jurisdiction. But if one of the parties or both the parties agree to the jurisdiction of ICJ, only then a case could proceed. In the same way, you're saying there is no enforcement mechanism here. So puts a great question mark on the hierarchy of the international order. I mean, do you think that it's an international government if we talk about UNO, or is it all non-binding?
It's all non-binding, and you can very clearly go back to the founding of the United Nations. It was meant as a body to allow great powers to negotiate disputes. It was not meant as a body and was deliberately not set up as a body to increase the agency of weaker states in the international system. And we saw the high watermark for global cooperation and the prestige of the rules-based international order happen in 1991 when the global community rejected the invasion of Kuwait by Saddam Hussein.
Yeah.
And since that time, we've seen a steady erosion of the prestige and credibility of that rules-based international order, and states are having to reassess how much they can rely on the global community to solve their domestic problems and their immediate disputes with neighbors.
So what's the source of this desperation that India is portraying lately? Is it hydropower energy that they are after, or is it water scarcity and inability to consummate the consumption of the masses that they have? Because if you talk about two projects specifically, Kishan Ganga and Ratle, India is trying to build dams in the water share that belongs to Pakistan. So do you think that India is energy hungry, or is water scarcity the basic driving force behind the suspension of this treaty?
Well, it's both. India has a rising population. They are trying to increase their level of industrialization and get more production contracts with global firms like Microsoft and Apple and try to get market share for global production away from China. They also have an extremely powerful domestic farming sector with a powerful domestic lobbying constituency. And so water, increasing access to water and hydroelectric production, it solves both problems for them.
Yeah, but if we talk about Pakistan, we have a heavy reliance on Indus water as well, because since we are said to have the largest canal system in the world, but the irrigation networks that we have, the basic source remains the water coming from the Indus. So what could be the economic blowback that Pakistan could face if India continues to build dams or reservoirs on the water channel that belongs to Pakistan?
Oh, it could be absolutely catastrophic for the Pakistani economy. Pakistan has seen a surge in its population over the past couple of decades, as well as a decline in the amount of water available to it through the Indus River Valley due to construction along the river, as you mentioned, and also due to climate change impacting how much water flows out of the Himalayas into that system. But the actual impact on Pakistan, it could cause a mass starvation event very quickly if even they went through one catastrophic season of bad agriculture.
Yeah, which means a possible situation of political tensions as well, because if there is mass poverty, people are going to rise against the authorities, right?
Oh, absolutely. This is an existential crisis for Pakistan. This is as big of a deal as the threat of a plague or the threat of a nuclear weapon going off in the capital. This could not be any more dangerous for Pakistan. The fact that India does have control over these waterways and is threatening to actually use that.
So this, I mean, the way that you have put it, Pakistan's reliance on Indus water is quite serious. So do you think that the international community has the acknowledgement that Pakistan could be put in a situation of do or die if this continues to happen? Because if you take away our water share, you take away our food security as well. And if you take away our food security, there are going to be political tensions, repercussions because of this.
I think the international community definitely recognizes that. The question is there any political will for them to intervene on the behalf of Pakistan or on behalf of Pakistan and India and resolve the issue? If we look at other areas of tension globally right now, whether it's the Russian-Ukraine conflict, Israel and Iran, Israel and Gaza, we haven't seen the international community to able to mobilize effectively to intervene and end any of those conflicts. And it's unlikely that we're going to see an effective mobilization here.
We all know that a potential mediation could only come from America, because we have seen that in the recent instance of Iran-Israel war as well. Do you think America under Donald Trump would be interested in mediating something like this, or do they remain indifferent to whatever that is happening in the region?
Well, the Trump administration would be incredibly interested in participating in this mediation. It would be a mark of prestige for them. Trump likes to make deals. He likes to fashion himself the peacemaker. But there's two main obstacles to that. One is India is not likely to accept such a mediation unless America really puts the screws to it, which doesn't seem likely that that's going to happen. The other problem is that we've seen the State Department in the United States.
No, but okay. Why do you think they stopped the war on a single phone call of Donald Trump? They accepted that. So why can't they accept a phone call on this instance as well?
Are you talking about the previous conflict with the ceasefire on May 10th?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, according to India, they had no input from Donald Trump when they accepted that ceasefire. That's been a narrative pushed by Pakistan and accepted by the United States, but it's not clear if Trump was actually the driving force behind that mediation.
So you think that, I mean, what is your personal take on it, that India could be compelled on a ceasefire without a US involvement?
I think India does not want to go over the brink, and that they're going to seek a renegotiation of the Indus Water Treaty on more favorable terms. But until then, they're going to use it as leverage over Pakistan. And they're going to take advantage of the distraction of other conflicts around the world that the international community is focused on to provide freedom of maneuver in those negotiations.
I see. Another impact of this could be China's interest as well, because China could be very intrigued by these developments as well. So since China is placed as an upper riparian over India, so how could they respond to something like this? Because many analysts coming from the Chinese government are also saying that this cannot be allowed, and then we'll also have our policies to formulate if this happens.
Well, China has long viewed India as one of its main global competitors, and it also happens to be right next door in the same region. So this is actually an opportunity for China to court closer ties with Pakistan as a potential mediator to raise its own prestige, and also to deepen ties with Pakistan to pull it out of America's sphere of influence, closely aligned into China's sphere of influence as a balance against India.
So, I mean, is it possible for India to completely halt the inflow of water? Because there has also been a debate that they lack the infrastructure to orchestrate something like this in the near future.
Well, yeah, they can't do it right now, but they can definitely develop that infrastructure if they choose to over a number of years. And also, Pakistan relies on the Indus water so much, they would not need to do a complete shutoff of that water supply. Just as dangerous for them to do would be a partial shut-off during a particularly bad drought, or increasing the water flow and creating flood events downstream. Any change in the flow of that river system, whether it's up or down, can have catastrophic consequences for communities along its banks.
Yeah. So since we all know that World Bank is a third-party guarantor to this agreement as well, so their silence has been really strange as far as to Pakistani audiences. So how do you see that? I mean, do you think that they can step up their role and put some sanctions, or you know, call India to have a negotiation over this matter with Pakistan?
They can certainly call, but again, there's no enforcement mechanism in the treaty, and their role is just to be an administrator. So it's not clear what leverage they would have over India in this case.
No monetary fines as well? They can't do anything there as well?
What they can do and what they're willing to do are two very different things.
I see. So moving forward, since you said there are no enforcement mechanisms, so this is quite a realist perspective, something that John Mearsheimer has also stated. So this is a tension or a kind of an international order which is prevalent in the last few years, that if America has to do something in Iran, or Israel has to do something in Palestine, they can do it and there cannot be repercussions. So this trajectory of the international order, isn't this worrying? Isn't this reminiscent of the interwar period of the 20th century, when any aggressor, whatever they chose to do, they did that?
It is concerning, and it does indicate that we might be going into an era of increased geopolitical conflict between nation states. Despite all the conflicts around the world, the post-World War II era governed by this rules-based international order has been historically the most peaceful time in human history per capita, and we might be seeing an end to that, and states might have to rethink the reliance on the rules-based international order and how they structure their domestic security policy and the relationship with neighbors in order to maintain their sovereignty and assert their national interest.
I see. So if we talk about the possible potential resolution of this dispute, do you think that Pakistan can afford to retreat a bit from their position or whatever the treaty granted them? Or do you think we are not in a position to do anything about it, since our own consumption demands the share to be persisting, whatever the treaty guaranteed?
Well, there's two parts of that. One, it's less of what a state can afford and what they have to accept. The other part is that the canal system in Pakistan is massive, and parts of it have actually prevented monsoon waters from coming out of the mountain ranges and flowing into the Indus River domestically. So there may be ways to explore new agricultural techniques and redesign the canal system in Pakistan to make it less reliant on the inflows from the Indus River itself and more sustainable based off domestic sources of rainwater that flow in. That rainwater has been blocked from entering due to certain parts of the canal system. So there might have to be a wholesale restructuring of the domestic infrastructure inside Pakistan to recognize the new reality that they might lose access to part of their water supply from the Indus River.
Yeah, so since Pakistan has made it clear that they see it as an act of war, in the worst case scenario, do you see a massive conflict escalating because of hydro tensions between the two countries in the future?
It's certainly possible, but there's a realist perspective there, and that if there is a major escalation, Pakistan is going to be on the losing end of that. Now, that would draw in the international community because any major escalation between two nuclear-armed states would bring in international mediation very quickly.
Yeah.
The question is how much bloodshed happens before we get to that point.
I see. Thanks a lot, Scott, for being on the show.